And I decided to dress in kind of an homage to, in the best of my ability, to Snow White. The blue, you know, she wears the blue. I don't have dark hair though, so you know, there we go. I feel like it's more Evil Queen vibes. I even got my trusty dearly departed hair. Weird. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the channel. I'm Galatea, and this is my channel. So what I thought I would do today is talk about. I thought I'd talk today about the Daily Wire and their Snow White film, which they are making to kind of compete with Disney. It's just going to be kind of some of my initial thoughts and some positives, I think, to it, and also there's some things I'm a little bit like, I don't know about the whole thing. So I thought I would talk about this because people often ask me to talk about media again, and storytelling, which, by the way, I still do sometimes. They just tend to not get as many views as well as the other videos I do, but I still do that. I did one on the Barbie movie. Earlier this year I did films talking about the meaning of Cinderella, like stuff like that, and I still enjoy doing that. So yeah, we're gonna get into it, and I'm just gonna, and again, there's not much to go off because the Daily Wire is just a promo video. It's really short, hardly anything there. It's unlikely that any of that is actually going to be used probably in the final movie. It just looks like something they've put together to market it at this point. Okay, so I'm going to get into that. For anyone who doesn't know, the Daily Wire, which is a company, I believe, co-owned by Ben Shapiro and Jeremy Boring, which is an unfortunate name, I do have to say. Co-owned by those two, I believe, or at least they're the front-facing kind of main guys at the Daily Wire, which has multiple, you know, the politics, that kind of, but they're expanding into filmmaking. So I know they made Terror on the Prairie, didn't they? And then I think they did, there was one like about I don't know if I can say it on YouTube, the pew pew in a American establishment of education. That I feel like is the worst way to say that I could have thought of. Anyway, okay, so I've not seen those two films, mainly because I didn't want to watch them, just because it's just not my thing. Neither of those things appealed to me. And I've heard that, you know, they're fine. That seems to be the general consensus that I've heard. It's like, yeah, they're not terrible, but they didn't seem to be groundbreaking either. I don't know, I've not seen them. So yeah, they're moving into filmmaking, and they've been wanting to do that for a while, and recently they've just launched their new kids app called Bentkey. Bentkey, is that how you say it? Which my first thoughts, to be honest, really awkward name. Bentkey. Yeah, it is, it's Bentkey. I don't know if that's just me, but I find that really, I remember I saw that for the first time written down, that seems so, this is just irrelevant. I was like, it just seems like an awkward word, Bentkey, like difficult to, maybe it might be just me, difficult to say, or like, I don't know, whatever, it doesn't matter. So that's their kids app. Now I googled it, it's coming up with like articles saying, oh, it's lame, it's terrible. I don't know how much of that's true and how much of it's politically motivated, so who knows. Are they a streaming service or they're an app? They're with kids content, basically. And so as part of the Bentkey kids content, they're also then doing a Snow White. Obviously as a dig at Disney, because Disney has just been slated. I've not seen anyone excited for this Snow White thing, anyone anywhere. I think everyone thinks it's going to be a terrible idea. Disney Snow White. What do I think? Okay, so I'll just give my first thoughts on what do I think about the Daily Wire moving into filmmaking and like Bentkey as well. What do I think of those things? I think it's a good thing overall, just because I would like Disney, I guess, to have as much competition as possible, because I think they've gotten very lazy recently. I also think it's a good thing to have multiple perspectives in storytelling and filmmaking. Like, yes, the Daily Wire obviously a more obviously like being a political kind of organisation as well. They've also got a different perspective than a lot of the kind of mainstream film industry, and I don't think that's a bad thing. I think, you know, as many perspectives in storytelling, so they're coming from a more conservative point of view, that's fine. I don't have a problem with that, and I think it's a good thing overall. I think it's a good thing overall, and that they're giving there's more ideological variety than in storytelling and film. I think it's good I think as many people as possible should be competing with Hollywood. I think it's good to see kind of companies come along and start to well, provided that they do, hopefully, touch wood, make good content, that they're coming along competing with Hollywood, with Disney, with all those things, and maybe giving people an alternative to watch who don't like it, or maybe people who are struggling to get hired in the industry or blacklisted from the industry for whatever reason. Which I say that because normally it's something silly. I feel like sometimes people, if people, or like, let's say more conservative actors or movie makers or whatever who want to be in a project that more aligns with their values. That's fine. I think that's good. I think it's not just fine, it's good. I think it's good. I think it's good to have as much variety out there as possible in the arts, because I feel like that's what the arts should be. They should be, and that's a problem I've had with the film industry and the arts for a long time. I think it's very much, and even getting progressively more so, got a very definite left-wing, not just slant to it, but just incredibly far left, a lot of it, which is fine as long as there's like stuff, like a variety of stuff kind of all in between. But it seems like a lot of it is very heavily kind of one way, which I think is damaging just to the arts in and of themselves, because I think what keeps creativity and well, literature, movies, all of everything, the arts, what keeps it fresh and interesting and engaging is the ability to, like more creativity. You need new ideas. You need disagreements. You need, this wasn't what this video was supposed to be about, but I think you do get into problems with storytelling of any kind or art or whatever it is, when you've got a very particular message that you want to get across. And messages in movies and films and stories aren't bad. Every film and story has a message, but it's if you're putting that above the story. And also what I seem to find, which I kind of dislike, is that a lot of things now, which is the problem I have, they will caricature the opposing side. So it's fine if you as a filmmaker have a position and you want to show that position in your movies or stories, but then instead of giving an accurate portrayal of the other side of people who disagree with you, because you want to win, you don't portray them accurately, which makes your films, rather than feeling like a genuine exploration of an issue, of a complex issue where people have different opinions, and you can still have an opinion in it, but you're giving respect and you're being, an accurate kind of showing of all the complexities of it, of why people on the other side would believe what they believe without just making them a caricature. All of these things are desperately important in storytelling, and I feel like a lot of it has just been cast out in a lot of things that at least I've seen nowadays, and getting kind of progressively worse at that. And an example of it on the other side, for example, would be just as annoying if there's like a Christian movie where they portray all the atheists as like evil, terrible people. That's not a good story. Like a good Christian movie, if there is such a thing. No, I'm kidding. Look, I'm sure there are, but what that requires is a proper analysis of the issue, of a proper, like, actually being willing to doubt yourself and look at the holes in your own ideology and look at what the other people are saying. Like a good Christian movie would do that, and it wouldn't portray people who doubted or disbelieved as just being, the bad atheists, they're so mean, and they are like Scrooge, and they don't share their money like we Christians do. You know what I mean? A good movie would show, like, maybe the hypocrisies on their own side, and like, all of these complex things. This is now getting way off topic, I'm so sorry. Do you see why I need a script now? Just to add on and clarify, especially like when it's from mainstream Hollywood and the left, you see this quite a lot where they will particularly, so not just within the stories where they caricature the opposing side, but they also do it a lot with reviewers. So, like Captain Marvel thing, Brie, what's her name, who has been under fire and disliked for a long time for, getting on stage and saying something about that it was all the, like, what did she say? Something about, like, the straight white men who were hated seeing a strong woman. It's that stuff where it's like, hey, maybe you just made a bad project. Maybe people just didn't like your project. But even within that, they've got to make it, like, political and demonize the other side and be like, you just don't like this because you hate seeing strong, independent women. And it's like, hey, maybe people don't like your stuff for another reason. Just like I've seen this thing with a whole, new Robin Hood show, the Canadian show, where they... I've seen lots of people talk about it, and I've seen lots of clips from it, and I'll be honest, it doesn't, I haven't seen the show, but it does not look good. It looks terrible, in fact. But then you've got the director melting down on Twitter and going on interviews and saying that people just don't like it because they're like weird racist nerds or something. And it's stuff like that where it's like, hey, maybe it's got nothing to do with your politics or the fact that you've got diversity or whatever it is. Maybe it's because your story just sucks. And you put that before the storytelling, and you think that is good enough, that you think the virtue signaling is good enough to carry through a terrible story, and it's not. So that's something to go at the other side that you see quite a lot, and that winds me up no end in when you see it coming from the industry. So yes. So I think, and that's really bad in storytelling, whichever way it's coming from. And that's something I really do have a problem with in the media, in storytelling. TV shows, I think, are the worst for it, where it's just where the movie or TV show is just trying to virtue signal rather than making intelligent points about the issue. And I think in order to make intelligent points about the issue, you have to acknowledge and entertain the other side. That's what it is. That's what I was looking for. You have to, even if you don't believe it or agree with it, you have to entertain that you could be wrong and they could be right, and then explore that. Even if you still come to the same conclusions, I think that's how you do storytelling well, if you want to talk about those topics, okay? And even if you don't want to talk, I don't need to go, this is not what this video about. I could make a separate video on that. So, in short, I think it's a good thing to have multiple different perspectives in the industry, so long as the Daily Wire's content doesn't just do the same thing, but the other way around, where they have a conservative message they want to get across, and that comes before the story, and the story suffers as a result, and they caricature the other side, and it rather than telling intelligent, nuanced stories, it just becomes very stilted, conservative, correct way. Every traditional family always like those kind of messages. Then that will be bad. From what I've heard so far, they've been quite good. I don't know. I haven't seen them, I don't know, but from what I've heard, people have said they seem to have done an alright job so far at not doing that, which is good, because I know, so if that's the case, then that's good. So I think it's a good thing. Many different perspectives in the industry. I think it's a good thing to compete with Hollywood. I think it's a good thing that different voices from different parts of the culture, from different perspectives, are making stories and movies. So now we're going to get into some of my reservations, or criticisms is the wrong word, because we're not at the stage yet where I can criticize, because we don't know. They've not made the Snow White yet. But here are some of my worries. I'll get on to the Snow White in a minute. So I know that the other thing that the Daily Wire are adapting is a series of books called the Pendragon Cycle. Now you might realise from the name of this series that, yes, it's about Arthurian legend. I have not read these books, and I want to now, because they sound like an interesting series of books. Apparently it's like fantasy series, and it connects Atlantis with King Arthur and Camelot and all that kind of thing. Which I've always liked that idea. I enjoy that idea of connecting these mythological kind of realms or lost civilizations. I've always liked that idea. I'm just going to say, though, the first reservation, and this is not with Bentkey, because this isn't for, this is not for kids, this is just the Daily Wire Plus, maybe, is that what it's called? This is an adult, I think it's for adults, aimed at adult TV show, Pendragon Cycle. So it is an adaptation of a series of books, which made me feel slightly better about that when I realised, because at first I just thought they were doing another, their own TV show about Arthurian legend, and I was like, why? Why would, we've got so many of them, first of all. I'm not opposed to someone else doing another one, but it'd have to be for a reason and very good. And and also, why would the Daily Wire be the ones to do that? But hearing it, so it's an adaptation, I feel better about that. They're adapting a story, they're adapting these novels. However, so my first just little reservation about this is, I feel like people are going to be cross with me for saying this. However, it is a true thing that American companies adapting or telling, making shows or films of British or Celtic or, history or myths is always risky. It is always risky. It can work. Sometimes they do it well, but let's be honest, they do miss far more often than they hit. That's just my first instinct when I heard the Daily Wire was doing that was, oh, for fuck's sake, not another kind of American retelling of British legend, myth, history, like all of that. I'm just wary about that because they can get it. I'm not saying they can't get it right. Maybe they'll do fantastically, but there's just a bit of a history with American companies do it and they get it wrong more than they get it right. So we'll see how that goes. But I can't lie, if I hear any like poorly concealed American accents in an Arthurian legend, I will be very upset. This is definitely irrelevant to the topic of the video, but if anyone dares to comment that, you know, the American accent is how the Brits used to speak, no, it's not. It's not. It's really fucking not. We have hundreds of different accents that have been developing on these islands for over centuries and longer, you know. And I know that I've heard that old Shakespearean argument, the one that where the Americans claim that they have the real how would Shakespeare would talk. It's not true. Do you know, this is irrelevant to the topic, I'm very sorry. No, we do have, in Britain, we have accents where people pronounce the R in a word. So West Country accents is more like how Shakespeare would have sounded, which doesn't, I mean, there's some similarities with an American accent, but it's not the same as an American accent. And that's probably one of the closest, although it's not entirely a West Country accent either. But that's one of the closest to, you know, old Shakespeare sounded more like a West Country accent in England than it does like a modern American accent. So I don't want to hear that. I don't want to hear that. People in old England were not wandering around sounding like someone from California, you know, despite what people on Twitter will try to tell you. They also didn't speak like I do, I am aware, yeah, but this accent is still more believable in a historic or mythological story set on this here island. Okay? I feel like it takes you out of the story less. As I said, I'm sorry, this is so irrelevant to the entire video, but in my mind, I just had a vision of someone typing, you know, you shouldn't be mad if they sound American, because actually, and I just had to stop that awful potential future from happening right in its tracks. It's not just about the accents, though. It's not, as I said, I'm just wary of American productions of British history or myth. We'll see. It doesn't mean I automatically hate them. I'm not saying they can't do it. I'm not saying, oh, I hate it because they're American and they're going to do it bad. They might not. They might do it fantastically. I'm just saying I'm wary. That's one of the things I'm like, okay, how are they going to do King Arthur? The Daily Wire. You see what I mean? It just doesn't sound right. The Daily Wire is going to do King Arthur. Now that doesn't sound right. The Daily Wire... Camelot, you know, maybe they'll do fantastically. We'll see. But that's just my first, just kind of like, oh, interesting choice for first TV show. I actually hope it is good. I'm not wishing for that downfall. I actually hope it is good, just because the story sounds quite cool, and I'm probably going to read the books. Okay, so now on to this Snow White, the real star of the show. What do I think of the Daily Wire remake taking on Snow White? I have several complex thoughts on this. Firstly, I don't even before all of the like terrible publicity with Rachel Zegler, is that how you say it? I don't know. With her saying that she didn't like the original story and that, I mean, I saw that viral clip, you know, the weird, her saying that the prince was weird, all of that, which was just a PR disaster. And Disney saying that it wasn't going to be like the original story because it's not the 1930s anymore and girls don't need to fall in love, they need to have swords or whatever I don't know, they need to be leaders. Okay. So firstly, I don't think anyone liked that idea. There were loads of people who were like from all across the politicals, but who were like, why? Because the implication there, of course, is that, and I have my criticisms of the original Snow White. People who follow my channel, like, intensely will know this. But, you know, because of what she said and how she said it and what she's talking about, the implication is that any kind of, if she's a feminine princess who wants to fall in love and have a love story, then she's weak. And she's not a real feminist, and she's not empowered, and that sucks. You need to be a boss bitch babe and lead a kingdom. And I don't think anyone liked that idea. I saw people kind of all across the political spectrum being like, this is horrible, we hate it, and also can we stop shitting all over more feminine women? It just seems actually like misogyny. No one liked that. But even before that media storm with Rachel Zegler, did anyone want a live action version of Snow White? Even if they were going to be true to the original story? Because this is my thing. It seems like in all the firestorm of people getting pissed off that Disney's like going back, they're ruining their own stories. They've got no respect for the original stories and blah blah. Even like before, did people want a live action version of Snow White? Because I thought that we were all sick of all the endless remakes of things that there already are films for. Like, they remade Beauty and the Beast. Did we need it? No. Did we want it? No.
Is Emma Watson a good actress? No.
They remade Aladdin. Did we need it? No. Did we want it? No. Like, them going through all their old properties and just updating them, making live action versions. It seems pretty lazy, pointless, just because they know it will make money rather than coming up with something new. Even if they were going to stick to the original, and also, by the way, there are live action versions of Snow White. There was the one with Lily Collins years ago. Not that many years ago, but there was that one with her and Julia Roberts, was it? That was like a more kid-friendly version, like a musical. And then we had Snow White and the Huntsman, which again was a live action retelling of Snow White, which wasn't terrible. I've got mixed feelings now. It wasn't like amazing or anything either, but I thought the aesthetics of that were really cool. I thought, yeah. So anyway, but those are two very different recent live action adaptations of Snow White. So we've have them, and we've got the Disney original animation. Like, do we need another Snow White? Even if they were going to stitch the original story, I was not down for that. And to be honest, all in that process, when I heard that Disney were making Snow White, never once did I think that I would be okay with another remake if it just had Ben Shapiro. That didn't cross my mind. Like, I don't think, what would make this better? Oh, they're remaking all the, what would make this better? The Daily Wire. I didn't think that. I'm just not sure that the answer to a lack of creativity and new content at Disney was for the Daily Wire to just do the remakes instead. Is it a clever business move from the Daily Wire? Yes, it is, which is why I've got complex feelings on their decision to do this, because I think you can go at it from a few different views. So my first thing is, well, firstly, I think like many other people, when I saw the promo video for the Daily Wire Snow White starring Brett Cooper, it did look like a joke. I thought it was a joke. I think I knew beforehand that it wasn't a joke, because people like the Daily Wire, so I heard about it before, and then I saw the promo, and it seems like a joke. So my first thing is just like worried that it's just a bit of a gimmick. Obviously, the Daily Wire are seizing the free publicity opportunity, which, fair enough, very clever, they're a business. Watch Shapiro Snow White to own the libs. I get it. But that's my worry, is how good is it going to be as a creative project? And again, this is my speculation, I could be wrong, I'm not saying it's going to be terrible, I'm not supposed to be, you haven't even seen it, you're saying it's going to be I'm not saying any of that. These are my worries on viewing the promo and because of everything surrounding this film. These are the things that I'm concerned about. And if I'm wrong, you can all come back when the film comes out and tell me I'm a loser and I'm really stupid. As I say, I'm suspicious of a political entity making creative stuff in the first place. And yes, that cuts both ways. I hate overt, here's our message in anything. And that's just infested the whole of the industry. I want the story first, the morality tale second. Maybe the Daily Wire, I'm not saying the Daily Wire is not going to do that. If they can do that, great. But the problem with this, and I've heard that the Daily Wire aren't terrible. Like, they seem to be, and this is just from what I've heard, that they seem to be good at keeping the politics out of their stories. But this particular project is so very loaded. My worry is this entire movie just entirely reactionary against Rachel Zegler and Disney? Have they made most of their creative choices based on that as a reaction against the current Disney project? And also, as I say, do we need another dry retelling of Snow White with no kind of original spin? I don't know if we do. Like, my thoughts, actually, when I heard this, were kind of, like, what's the point in the Daily Wire remaking Snow White if they're not going to do a unique take on the story, purely because there are already so many versions? And I'm not saying that means they have to pull a Disney and ruin the the spirit of the original story and be disrespectful to the fairy tale, I would point again to, and I'll probably get to this later, I would point again to the Disney's remake of Cinderella, the live-action Cinderella from 2015, which is a very good movie. I think it's a fantastic fairy tale story. I think it had a unique take on Cinderella. It felt fresh, it felt new, while still being loyal to the essence of the story. I did a video on that, so feel free to watch. I'll link it down below, I'll put it wherever, so please go watch if you would like my thoughts on that. Yeah, honestly, the whole Daily Wire Snow White thing, I know people are getting really hyped for it, but I just have a bit of a bitter taste in my mouth. I'm just not really sure that that's the answer to the film industry's creativity and remake problem. And I understand why they've done it. I know why they've done it, and I'll get to that later. So it just feels this is kind of what I picture when I heard about this whole thing. Like, it just feels like as they were launching their kids app, they were sat in the boardroom, trying to come up with ways to market it, and the Snow White disaster was going on at the time with Disney. PR disaster, everyone hates Disney's Snow White idea, and then someone in the boardroom was like, how quick can we get our own Snow White adaptation churned out, Ben? And Ben's like, someone get Brett Cooper on the phone, get her down here now, let's shoot a promo, go, go, go team, this is a marketing mission. That's kind of how I imagine it went down. So I did film this video quite a while ago, though it does now seem that there is evidence that my guess at how this Daily Wire Snow White idea came about was not inaccurate. So I'm going to play this clip, a recently uploaded interview from The Critical Drinker interviewing Ben Shapiro, and it does not bode well that is basically what Ben admits to having gone on, of how it happened, of how the idea came about. He even says that it was rushed. He says in there it's a rushed project, and he seems to be talking about the marketing of it, very highly emphasizing that. So my kind of worry that it's a rush job done for marketing purposes does not seem to be inaccurate. Now, that doesn't mean the film will be bad, but at this point I'm not thrilled about how he himself is describing his own creative project from the Daily Wire. So there we go.
So we got the idea for it literally the day that Rachel Zegler did an interview in which she said that she hated the original Snow White and wanted to rip the guts out of it. And then Disney released those ridiculous cast photos of dwarves that were not dwarves, the multiracial, multi-ethnic, tall people and one dwarf. And it was at that point that this is how we make decisions at the Daily Wire. I literally just emailed that to my business partner, Jeremy Boring, and I was like, we should do something like this. And Jeremy's like, okay, we're just going to make Snow White. So we decided that we were going to do a very rushed movie of Snow White, but we're going to do it to all the specs, with music, with singing, with the original storyline in classic fashion that imbibes from the original well of the values. Specifically because if Disney wants to cede that field to us, we'd be fools not to take it. And we're kind of shocked by the fact that no other studio has done that. I mean, just on a pure market basis, if you have one of the most significant film achievements of all time, one of the most popular movies of all time, and the people who are making the remake of that movie in live action fashion have decided to betray that movie and say out loud, it's not even like a surprise, they're saying out loud, we want to betray this movie, we don't like the original values that a woman is reliant on a man, she's a girl boss who's going to be, I don't know, fighting the witch on her own, and the prince is going to be standing off to the side, if there is a prince at all, and if she's not a transgender, non-binary, Snow White, whatever. Like, it would be idiotic not to go back to, the thing that works, and do the thing that works in the face of the thing that clearly is not going to work. And Disney has a horrible habit of doing this. They keep taking some of the greatest IP of all time, and they're still living off the money from that IP, right? I mean, they're putting up on Disney Plus all these placards ahead of Aladdin saying this movie is super offensive, but I saw they didn't take down the movie, right? They still know that we all want to subscribe so that our kids can watch the original Aladdin, so they're making money off of it, but then they'll make the live action Aladdin, make it way worse for a quick money grab. Well, if I can essentially grab, if our company can grab the legacy of the original Snow White, then why would we not do that? We should do that.
And the calculating Machiavellian part of me, who knows I had it in me, but that part of my brain, respects it. And that part of my brain really thinks, now that is a smart business move, a smart marketing move. It's a brilliant way to get a ton of free publicity, because there's the whole thing with Disney's going on. You kind of ride on that wave, and it's a great way to set themselves up as the anti-Disney, or the alternative. If you don't want your movies ruined by woke Disney, The Daily Wire has traditional Disney. We're like Disney as it used to be. We're bringing back those good old wholesome American fairy tales, which of course aren't really American at all, but never mind. But there's that, and from that aspect, I can't really begrudge them for that. There's a part of me that's like, I respect that. That's a clever decision. That's clever from a marketing standpoint. That's a clever business move. I do not begrudge you making Snow White. And then, the hopeless romantic part of my brain, or my soul, the hopeless romantic in me objects to that on principle, as a very distasteful method, and I just the hopeless romantic part of me just is like, yeah, it's distasteful, it's commercial. I just remaking yet another Snow White just to own the libs just seems like a stupid reason from a creative standpoint. From a business standpoint, it's pure genius. I just want to say as well, just to, like, if people don't know, so one of the main reasons I started my channel was to talk about children's and young adult literature and storytelling. That's my first passion. That's always been my first passion, is children's stories. Big fan. I think children's content is really important. I think people who've been following me for a while will know that I'm passionate about good quality stories for children. I, under no circumstances, accept the excuse that you can be lazy or create bad stories if it's just for kids. No, unacceptable. The best children's stories are timeless, they're classic, they are entertaining for adults to watch. They're deep, they're meaningful, they're well crafted, and I think some of the best stories that have ever been told are children's stories, because I think when you get a children's story right, it goes so right, and it just becomes like so... It's just so, I just think children's literature is really important, and I really avoid this like the snobbery towards children's stories as not having to be intelligent or whatever it is. Okay, so that's like that might like I'm passionate about good stories for children, and I always have been, even ever since I was a kid. Love them, love the stories. I'm just not sure. It just doesn't seem that original, this Daily Wire remake of Snow White. Like I get it. The Daily Wire sort of take, they're making the film that Disney should have made. My thing would be, they did already make that film back in the 1930s. I'm just not sure, like, who wanted a live action Snow White in the first place. That's just what I come back to. I'd have said the same if Disney were making it. I shouldn't bother because everyone already was like, it's going to be terrible, it's terrible, everything they've made is terrible. The Mulan remake was terrible. Beauty and the Beast, like it's just all, like, why do we need it? Do something new. Do something new. Stop remaking the classics and trying to relive your golden age. And I feel the same that the Daily Wire are now doing a Snow White. A big part of it, because they're not doing anything unique with it. Or then maybe they are. I know we haven't, but that's my worry. In which case, what's the point? I'm not saying an original, true to the fairy tale Snow White is a bad thing. It's not. We just already have that. There are a few of them. So unless you are going to do something new, that's where I'm like, what's the point? We've got that movie. We've got it at least twice, because there was the Mirror Mirror one, that's the happy, cheesy fairy tale one, and there was the original kind of story. And then I Snow White and the Huntsman was actually, I thought that was quite good. I thought that was quite a fresh, unique take on that. And I'm just not sure how many Snow White movies we need. Here's a fairy tale, 12 Dancing Princesses. That's a really good fairy tale. No one's made that fairy tale into a movie yet. That's a fantastic little fairy tale. That could be beautiful and wonderful and just magic. You could do that could be the new one of the new, or anything. You don't have to choose that one. There are more fairy tales that haven't been made into movies. But Disney won't do that because they're making commercial decisions from just purely commercially for remakes. And the Daily Wire seem to also be doing that. Which, again, I understand. They're a business. And I understand they don't have a big budget, so they need to be clever with what they're making. They're not Disney, that level. I do have a problem. Okay, and what I was saying before about... This probably might sound a bit silly and nitpicky of me to be harping on the whole marketing thing about, like, this Snow White film feels kind of like a marketing publicity decision. And people are like, yeah, well, they're a business. They need to make money. Like, which I know. From that point, it's... Like, my worry is if it's too much that, and it might not be. Maybe it won't be. But... I know people might think I'm kind of a nitpicky, but... So here... Oh, God. How do I get... I don't want to go off into... So, okay. and this is I understand this is my taste, and this is probably a pet peeve of mine specifically. So in the past, I've never hidden my views on this channel about how I feel about cheesy fairy tales or cheesy magic. Like, for example, an example that I use a lot to like be like as an example of this is a thing that I hate when they do this with magical things. H2O that just had water, that show, which I recognise is like everyone loves it. Yeah, okay, people can come in and think, you're such a hater, you're such a killjoy, why would you... I'm sorry, I really dislike things like that. I think it makes the magical mundane. Or like when you have fairies that go to high school. Like Netflix's Winx is another example of like, you have just ruined the magic of everything because fairies now have iPhones and they go to high school and it's cheesy and it's stupid. They're supposed to be magical and mysterious and unknowable and kind of beyond human, and you've just made them mundane. And I also felt like that as a child. These are not adult feelings. I felt like that as a kid as well. But it's like that, I don't know how else to explain this other than it just... And when they do fairy tales like that as well, when it feels very corporate, it feels like a corporate fairy tale, commercialized, like a commercialized fairy tale that kind of feels cheap and plastic, more like a theme park than a fairy tale, which I think people tend to do with children's content a lot because they think that it needs to be either really flashy, they miss out on the subtleties of magic. It's just cheesy. It's overly sickly. Yeah, more like a theme park than a fairy tale. And I think there's a kind of lazy, sometimes, not always, but sometimes there can be a lazy storytelling element to those kinds of stories because they're like, oh, well, it's just for kids. It's just for kids. Let's put a pretty dress on it and which, and I know that people are probably going to not, statement is going to cause controversy. And the initial vibe I got from the promo video that the Daily Wire did was that it was a little bit like that. And I think the only way you can get away with that kind of cheesy, so obviously fairy tale kind of has got... I dislike that on a personal level. As I get that's not my taste. Even, and this is not just me as an adult saying that. I didn't like it as a kid. I don't like it for kids' content. I think it's a little bit lazy, and that's not me saying that you can't have magical fairy tale stories for kids. Absolutely. When you can get away with a story like that, when I don't mind it and I think it's good, is if you can get away with that in a cartoon. That's the point. It's a cartoonish world, so I don't have a problem with the original kind of Disney fairy tale stories. They're cartoon animated worlds. Beautiful, wonderful, that's fine. It's literally cartoonish. Other movies that have that fairy tale feel, that work, Ella Enchanted and Enchanted. Coincidentally, very similar names. The reason these films work, where they feel very Americanized, I know people might go, I don't mean that as an insult, I just mean it's that very specific, it just feels very like corporate Americanized, like more like a theme park than a fairy tale. Like it feels like Disneyland in and of itself. Very cheesy, a little bit campy, which is fine, and it's good. Like, I love the films Ella Enchanted and Enchanted, by the way. But the reason they work is because they're intentionally camp. They are self-aware. They're poking fun at the fairy tale world. They're playing with... they're not serious fairy tales that are supposed to be taken entirely seriously. Both of those films are kind of commentaries on the fairy tale genre, and commentary, which I think is the only way you can really get away with that, and for it to be like a really good this is my opinion, and for it to be like a good movie. And the only other circumstances that those kind of work, I think, is also a cartoon. Now, there's nuances here, because Cinderella, the Cinderella remake with that Kenneth Branagh did with starring Lily James, that was a very traditional fairy tale. And this is the thing, this is where you get into, like, the devil's in the detail, isn't it? This is where you get into, it's like, it's all the details that take something from being, like, everything is in details and just elevating a project and elevating something. So that's in the Cinderella remake. I think it's a beautiful film. I love that film. I really do. And it's very, like, fairy tale. It's very, like, sweet. It's very, like, aesthetically it's like that. It's like that. The story's like that. She's very much a Disney princess. But just because of how it's done, I would need to, it's so stylized, it's so highly stylized, the film. It's so aesthetic. Like with it, I think I said in my video about like the costumes and stuff. That works. It's just subtle enough that they get away with that. I feel like anything more cheesy than that would have not worked, but that's like... Yeah, and that's so I don't know, I need to think and clarify my thoughts on this, that sometimes those kind of things can work, but it's rare, and Cinderella is one of the only serious takes on that kind of straightforward live action story that I've seen that succeeded. A lot of the others, unless they're kind of poking fun and self-aware, I find it too commercial, too sweet, too sickly. It feels a bit like a pantomime, hammed up, like no grace and subtlety. It's kind of like emotionally vapid, forced positivity, empty candy floss, sickly feeling, sickly, yuck. And again, I'm not saying this is what the Daily Wire's product is going to be. I'm just saying that would be my worry if I think they're kind of going to do that. Like something really like lacking in creativity, I think is what I'm trying to say. Something that they're just straight telling the Snow White story, and my question that would be why we have that, unless you're going to do it in a fresh way. If it's just and the thing that kind of partly made me think that was. And again, this is promo video, so they're probably not going to use necessarily any of this in the actual film. But the promo felt a bit pantomimey, just very cheesy, but not in a subtle. I'm not saying you can't have magic and subtlety, and there are lovely stories that have those things in that just don't feel cheesy. But it just felt kind of cheesy. Brett Cooper, like how she, like her look as Snow White, it just looked a bit too cartoonish. Just too much makeup. The dress it just looks like a costume. It looks too much like a costume, not like, I don't know. It's a fine line, and maybe like I say, that's the promo video. Maybe the final project's not going to be that, but just initially, my kind of thing is, I'm worried about how much creativity is going to be in this project for a number of reasons. For the marketing reasons I stated, for the fact that we've got so many Snow Whites already. There's various things, and maybe I'm not saying I'm right. I could be really wrong. That's just a worry I have. And look, there's just a few. One of the other reasons I say this is because, yeah, I'm just not sure how much originality, how much creativity, how much ingenuity is going to be in these projects the Daily Wire are doing. And now that might be different for the adult content, and I say it because this is something you kind of see time and time again. I do think there's some brilliant kids content out there, but I think sometimes people. And I hope that, I'm not saying this is how it is, I'm just saying I hope that they don't, but that people can, that kids' content is seen as a cash grab rather than as a creative, intelligent project that you should put real work and thought into. Because they're like, it's just for kids, it'll make money, let's just, something cheesy and cool, and they'll like, you know what I mean, where you don't put any depth to it. And one of the, like, it just feels, the whole thing just feels very commercial. And one of the things that kind of made it feel very more commercial, I think it was, around the same time, both Matt Walsh and Candace Owens did, like, I think Candace might have said it in a video, I think Matt Walsh, he did like a community post on it. They both did, and probably the others have done this as well, I don't know, I've not seen from them, but I just know Matt Walsh and Candace Owens around the same time were promoting, like, Chinchilla, what is it called? I don't know, is that what it is? There's some cartoon anyway, the Daily Wire are doing. And both Candace Owens and Matt Walsh were promoting it around the same time. And both of them said, like, Matt Walsh's post was, my kids love watching Bentkey, or like watching this show on Bentkey. Sign up to Bentkey, their like kids app. Candace Owens, the same thing. In her video, in one of her videos that I saw, she was then promoting, it was the Snow White, I think it was Snow White, I think that's why I watched it. Because I was like, why I don't watch Candace Owens' videos. Certainly not after her, you know, how honest she is. I think it was the one where she was talking about Snow White. I watched that, and I think it was in that one where she like pitched this same cartoon, and saying, my kids love watching Bentkey, my kids are, and I there's just something about that I don't like, and I know it's a business, and I get it. It just feels like a marketing campaign, the whole thing. Just too much, and I get that they need to market stuff, but there's something it feels insincere about their presenters at the same time coming out with, hey, my kids love watching this cartoon, and maybe their kids do love it. Maybe that's true. Maybe their kids do love it, but it just feels inauthentic. And I get that the Daily Wire are, you know, they're a business, I get it, and, you know, and I'm not naive enough to think that the money men aren't important, and, you know, all we need is a dream in our hearts and a wish, and all the creative stories that we want will be told, and everyone should be a struggling artist. Okay, I get it, the business has got to run. Just the sales pitch every time, it just feels, just all these decisions that they're kind of making, I get they're pushing this at the moment, but it just feels insincere. I just don't like how corporate it feels, and maybe that won't be a problem, maybe that won't translate. This doesn't need to be a bad thing. It doesn't necessarily mean that that will translate into the quality of the stories or the content. But it might, because if they're making commercial decisions over creative decisions, that's when I don't really like it. It just feels a bit like they all got handed, all the Daily Wire presenters get handed the script to pitch the new Daily Wire product, every time, whether they actually like it or not. So maybe Candace Owens' kids and Matt Walsh's kids do genuinely sit down and love watching this particular show, but really, you guys, at the same time, that's why it feels sincere, doesn't it? Like, even if I believe you'd post that whether your kids liked it or not. Why? Because it's probably come down from the top, isn't it? Jeremy's gone, right, Matt, Candice, everyone, all the other presenters, here's what we're pitching, just put a post on your channel, talk about this, say your kids love it, or what. I don't know, maybe that's not how it happens. I feel like it probably is, and I wouldn't be surprised if they posted that, even if their kids didn't love it and they didn't care and they didn't watch it, just because it feels so just designed to, which is a problem, I think, actually, for the Daily Wire, which is supposed to be a kind of grassroots company where they've kind of hired on people who started off independently and just say their opinions, and the Daily Wire kind of lets them do whatever they want to talk about, which I hear is something that they say a lot. Okay, that's fine. But then when things like that happen and they're all promoting this thing at the same time, like, my kids love this show, it feels fake. Maybe that won't be a problem, but that's just, I just don't really like that. But I understand, again, a business, yes, okay. And it's got me talking about it, because I hadn't heard of it before, so okay, yeah, fine. It's just if that spills over into the content, because I feel like people do have a tendency to see kids stuff as a bit of a cash grab, so I don't know. I'll talk about my expectations for this Daily Wire film. What do I think then? I've talked about some of my worries. What do I think this Snow White retelling, what do I expect to see, the final product? So, I'll be honest, and I could be wrong, I could be proven wrong. My highest expectations for this film are that it will be fine. Those are my highest expectations. My prediction is that best case scenario, this will be a straightforward, simplistic, conventional, and just fine retelling. I'm popular, getting messages, but just fine retelling of Snow White that we didn't need and no one asked for. Yeah, so as I know they're sticking really hard to the original, and I also think, so I think, best case scenario will be that fine, straightforward, uncreative, unoriginal, fine. But I also, along with that, I have a simultaneous prediction that this film will be incredibly overhyped and overpraised, regardless of how good it is, just because a load of people will want to stick it to Disney. So they'll probably say that this Daily Wire Snow White is the most magical children's film ever made, even if it is boring and hack. Just as long as Snow White falls in love and gets saved like princesses are supposed to, I think loads of people will love it and say it's like the best thing since sliced bread. Look, I don't mean to be facetious. I have a long history of defending traditionally feminine characters, but that's also just not enough for a story. And I feel like that's all people will judge it on. But maybe I'm just cynical. I could just be cynical. Look, I get it. Am I mad at the Daily Wire for doing this Snow White retelling? No. I get it. Disney suck. Their messages suck. They're destroying themselves. They have no respect for the source material. Is it good that someone's taking them on, or will do the project that you wouldn't do? Yeah, that's fine. There's part of me that's like, yeah, you know what, Disney deserve it, stick it to Disney. But again, that's kind of my point and my worry. I have a feeling that this movie is going to be defined more by how much they hate Disney's version rather than on its own merit. I mean by the people watching it. I feel like this film is just going to likely be more defined by how much people dislike Disney rather than how much they like this actual film, however it goes. And I just feel like that's kind of an artificial and uncomfortable place for a creative project to be in. It just kind of feels inherently a little bit reactionary, and I get it. You don't want to, if you're making a fairy tale, you don't want to disrespect the source material, but at the same time, if you're going so reactionary against, which is kind of what it is, let's be honest, it's a reactionary project, literally is. I don't think they'd be making Snow White if not for Disney doing it now. So, but in going so reactionary and trying to prove, hey, we're going to stick so hard to this source material, that in itself has its own problems, because I'm just worried there's going to be a lack of creativity there, a lack of anything fresh. That in itself is not a good thing, to because you're not approaching, this is my worry, if you're not approaching the project of like, how can we tell the best Snow White story we can? What like brilliant ideas do we have? What story, like if you're not approaching it like that, if you're like, we'll do what Disney, then how genuine is the creative project? How is it just feels kind of more artificial then. It just feels more like, are you actually, there, you know, you don't have to shit all over the original fairy tale, but there are some cases where it might work better to take some creative risks. It might work better to have something fresh about the story. Why wouldn't you? Because it's been told before. So but my kind of feeling about both these Disney projects is they're probably both gonna maybe not be the best in different ways. So I've talked about those are my expectations. Now, what would I like to see for a Snow White remake? Okay, so if I wanted to see a Snow White remake, I would like to see it go one of two ways. The first way, unique and dark, which no, isn't a modern interpretation or ruining the source material. Not at all. When people, it's like, yeah, that kind of thing. When people, if you make it too dark, what an edgy modern retelling of this classic story. That reminds me of the same people who think that the 1950s is real traditionalism. It's like the same vibe. It's like, no, that's a little blip in history where things were like that. And that's not actually traditional. That's like a product from a particular time. And everything before that was a lot darker. So like all these Disney fairy tales, the actual real fairy tales, before Disney modernized them, which they did, were dark and twisted. And that is real traditionalism, if you want a traditional fairy tale. They're all a little twisted. All the fairy tales were a little twisted, including Snow White. So, and I kind of love that. Could you tell with the skull? Even as a kid, I really liked those stories. And here's what, okay, Coraline. Coraline is actually a fantastic modern fairy tale that keeps the essence of a fairy tale far more than Disney tellings of actual fairy tales. And it's brilliant and beautiful. It's such a good story. I know, Galatea trying to get through a video on fairy tales without mentioning Neil Gaiman's work challenge. Impossible. But the book and both the book and the film, it's very, like those kinds of fairy tales, I like them. They feel very fairy tale like a proper fairy tale.
So actually, after I'd filmed my video, I came across this video by a YouTube channel, Folkwalk, and I just watched this. They're them talking about the Daily Wire's Snow White, and it was a really good video. I'll link it down below. But they touch on a couple of points as well that I was trying to make. The first one being that what I was trying to say before about American kind of tellings of fairy tales or mythology or history can often feel commercial. There's this commercial thing going on, this cheesiness. I'll play this clip here where he puts it really quite well of kind of exactly what I was trying to get across.
But when it comes to Daily Wire adapting Snow White, there are things I don't like. The teaser they've put out very much remind me of Once Upon a Time because of Brad Cooper in that dress. I don't know why, but Americans have a tendency to glamorize everything, so the costumes are super pristine, everybody is beautiful like a model, and it has this effect where nothing seems genuine or authentic. Everything looks artificial. Like, you can see that the actors just left the makeup and costume department, and they are definitely not living in this environment and wearing those clothes every day.
He basically nailed it perfectly as well when he said that the promo and the teaser looks very much like Once Upon a Time, which, yes, if you want to talk about the epitome of, I'm sorry, but this is just true, the, like, epitome of dreadful Americanized adaptations of classic fairy tales that are just done in the most cheesy, obnoxious, like, sickening way. Once Upon a Time is it. I hate that show. I hate it so much. The Disneyfication of, like, fairy tales, not even in a cool Disney way, and it just looks bad, and it's just rubbish. But yeah, that's what it's giving me. So he said it really well. And then also there's another clip that I will put in where, again, he perfectly encapsulates my feelings about fairy tales and the kind of, I guess, the Americanization of fairy tales, but that's not even quite the right word, because it's not even necessarily the Americanization. It's like the corporate Americanization, the whole the American dreamification of, it's very American basically is what I'm trying to say, which might not be so obvious to an American, but it's so very much infused in American culture, even when they do historical or kind of fairy tale things, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it is if you're taking on a story from a different culture or scenario, and you can just feel that it just feels very much born out of that.
Another thing which bothers me is Disneyfication and pussification of fairy tales in general. This is a topic for a whole nother video I wanted to do for like a year now, but old fairy tales used to be pretty creepy and morbid, because they were based on folklore which is the same. Our Czech live-action fairy tales from the 70s and 80s are straight up horrors at times. Even the old Disney's Snow White still has a few scenes which are pretty creepy. I remember that as a kid I was a bit afraid of the scenes where Snow White is running through the forest and then when the evil queen is turning into the old hag. But as the time goes on and people have become softer and softer when it comes to raising children, even the fairy tales have changed, and nowadays they are more like dumb comedies with cringy humor. And just to be clear, I don't mind family-friendly fairy tales, especially when they are well written, so even adults can laugh with the kids. What I don't like is that those are the only ones being made today, and there's no new fairy tales with horror elements anymore. Especially fairy tales which would be inspired by actual folklore like old classical fairy tales. My point with this video is that all the things I mentioned are exactly what I don't like about Hollywood. As I said, I hate when they make everything look pristine, and I cringe almost every time when I see them trying to do anything historical. There are rare exceptions like Outlaw King and the Northman, but for the most part it's really bad. And from what I've seen so far, Daily Wire has exactly the same approach to these things. The only difference is that they are not woke, which is great, but it's just not enough for me. I want them to succeed because Hollywood desperately needs some competition, but if they want to compete with this giant, they need to be better than them in more than just one way, and actually innovate, especially in the aspects which could be easily fixed. So when you are adapting something from European folklore, culture or history, Daily Wire, hire someone who actually understands these things, so your movie looks authentic, genuine, historically accurate, and maybe even has a bit of that creepy atmosphere which our folklore has. Either do that or just keep doing westerns or movies about school shootings, because those are settings from your culture which you at least understand. If you want to adapt something from European history or folklore and do a good job, you need to put in more effort.
I mean, this was kind of harsh, but I can't argue with it. He's kind of got a point, to be fair. So yeah, I mean, I'll link that video down below. Please definitely go and watch it. He makes other points in the full thing. And I haven't actually seen any of his other videos, but I'm sure they're great. So yeah, go show some support, because he kind of really perfectly managed to say what I was struggling to articulate.
But okay, you know, I get it. Fine, you're gonna ruin my fun. We want a fairy tale retelling for good Christian children who subscribe to Benki. Okay, fine. Then, so if you can't do that way, my other hope that I would like to see for a Snow White remake would be, as I said, I would hope it would go in a similar direction to Kenneth Branagh's Cinderella. And I feel like that's how you do an age-appropriate, fresh, yet also still true to the essence of the story take on a classic fairy tale. I want it looking beautiful, highly stylized, like Cinderella did, a really strong visual. That's really important in a fairy tale, in a kid's fairy tale. About really, I want the really beautiful visuals, unique. That's not just looks like people wearing costumes like they're at Disneyland. I want the film to have a strong aesthetic, a look. And you don't necessarily need a huge budget for it to look beautiful either. Just a good eye and some creativity. Like, I just want a distinct look. You know, like the glittering minds of the dwarves in the original tale. In the Disney film. If you want to do something more like that, then like how those scenes are really beautiful. I want it to feel kind of like a magical fairy tale world. Like, bring that kind of magic in. The humour, you need like good humour. Like Cinderella, I think, had a lot of. It was playful. It was a playful film because it knew that it was on the border. It was just on the border of like tipping too far into cheesy, but it managed to not do that because it was playful with it. There was humour to it. It wasn't. And when real, this is the problem with like real live action people in live action films doing Disney princesses. It's difficult to do without seeming like a parody. To be, you know, like. Especially like Snow White. I hope it's not going to be much like any of that, because that worked in Enchanted, the film, again, because it's a piss take, it's a parody. It's parodying that the princesses. You can get away with things in cartoons that you can't in real movies, so I just hope it doesn't go too far that way. I want it to feel magical. If you're going to do that. And as for, because if people want like age, because I know I talk about, from my taste, people might be saying, oh, you seem to just like is there a family friendly fairy tale version that's not scary for little kids that you would like, or do you just want everything to be like scary? No, that's not true. Like I said, there's the Cinderella story was really good. It doesn't, scary is not what I'm looking for. It just needs to feel subtle and magical. A really good fairy tale film that I loved as a kid and I still love now, because it's one of the best, most magical feeling cartoons ever. The Last Unicorn. Like, that is how Fairytale should be. It's, if you haven't seen it, you should watch it as an adult. Watch it if you got kids, then I feel like it's one of the best fairy tale. Like that's how a fairy tale should be. There's nothing cheesy about it. There's nothing. It's beautiful. It's magical. It's mournful. It's like. It's just such a beautiful, like, it's got that fairy tale essence. It feels like, if you want to get what I mean when I say I don't like fairy tale films that feel like a theme park, that feel cheesy and too like sweet and sickly, The Last Unicorn's a really good example of a kid-friendly, beautiful, magical fairy tale that's like got the opposite feelings of that. Like, it feels like the opposite of a theme park. It feels like magical and mysterious and beautiful and like all those things. I love that. Yeah. So I don't know that, but that's my preferences. So those are my thoughts. There's just some worries I had about this Daily Wire project, but we'll see how it goes. Maybe it'll be fantastic. My favourite, if anyone cared, some of my favourite Snow White retellings were written by Neil Gaiman, actually. He did The Sleeper and the Spindle. It's not really Snow White, but there's allusions to it. And he also wrote Snow Glass Apples, which is definitely not child-friendly. That is a very unchild-friendly version of Snow White. But I do also love that. But I kind of like the dark fairy tales. I do. But I get it, you can't do that for kids. I just hope it's not overly corporate and overly... That's my worry. So that's basically my main worry with all this, with everything that kind of... their project. And you know what? I hope it's good. It might seem like I'm kind of willing them to fail. I've got my criticisms of the Daily Wire. People know that. I'm not a fan of Candace. I'm not a fan of a few aspects of the Daily Wire. But I want them to do well. I actually do. I think it would be good for there to be more options in the film and TV industry. I think it would be good for projects that, if they can stick to this, that don't have really overt political messages or are more fair towards the other side, if again they can do that. I don't want them to fail. I don't. I hope it goes well. It's just the first two projects that I've seen, that they're kind of these things they're doing now, which was the Arthurian legend one and the Snow White, given everything that's going on with Snow White. Cautious. And I think I will watch them because I'm curious to see how they do. I'm really curious to see how they do and how they do, because I actually don't know. It could be really, really good. And I'll say if they've done fantastically and all my worries were unfounded. But it might, who knows. But I think it's good. I think overall, it's a good thing. I think good that there's competition for Hollywood and Disney. Well, there we go. Thank you very much, everyone, for watching. If you want to check out my video on Cinderella that I did, where I talked about the meaning of that film and of what makes it, the power in a feminine hero, if you want to watch that, I'll link it down below. If you want to help me out, subscribe to my Patreon. I talk about other things. I've just started a book club over there as well, where I kind of talk about books. I do talk about a whole host of stuff over there. I don't really know how to explain. Oh, old scripts as well, videos that I never made, or videos that I made the beginning of a series for but didn't make the end of it for. That's all over on Patreon. That I don't take sponsorships at the moment, so that's the way to support the channel, is head on over there, then you're supporting what I do here. Yeah, and there's extra content, there's stuff that gets cut out if I have anything that gets cut out from longer videos and all that jazz. But there we go. So that's everything for now. Thank you everyone so much for watching. Aces says goodbye. Yeah, and look after yourselves.